The evening had started like any other. The city lights glittered like tiny diamonds scattered across velvet as a black SUV pulled up in front of the most luxurious restaurant in town. The manager, with a spine straighter than a ruler and a smile as polished as the silverware inside, rushed to open the door. Out stepped a man whose very presence seemed to still the air around him. Dominic Walsh, the billionaire CEO of one of the fastest growing tech empires in the country. Dominic was the kind of man people didn't just look at. They studied him. His tailored suit whispered old money. His Rolex told time with the confidence of a man who owned every minute. And his shoes, well, let's just say they hadn't touched a puddle in decades. The kind of man you only saw in business magazines or whispered about in boardrooms. But tonight, he wasn't there for deals or investors. Tonight was a rare moment of indulgence. A quiet dinner for one, away from the cameras, the boardrooms, and the yes men. As he stepped through the restaurant doors, the world outside vanished. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. A violinist played softly in the corner. Every detail screamed perfection, a place where the elite escaped the noise of the common world. Dominic nodded at the hostess, who nearly dropped her iPad trying to greet him. "Right this way, Mr. Walsh," she stammered. He followed, used to the quiet awe that came with his presence. It wasn't arrogance. It was expected, earned, or at least that's what he believed. Seated by the window overlooking the city skyline, Dominic ordered his usual aged steak, rare, and a glass of red so expensive the bottle had its own security. He leaned back, glancing at his phone, scrolling through emails that could make or break startups with a single tap. His world was pristine, precise. Nothing outside those restaurant walls mattered, at least not yet. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, almost mistaken for wind against the glass. Then again, louder, and then a voice. Fragile, rasping, like it hadn't tasted water in days. "Please, I just need something warm. Anything." Heads turned, conversations paused. Even the violinist faltered mid-note. Standing just outside the glass wall was a woman. Her coat was more of a suggestion than a garment. Threadbare, torn at the sleeves. Her shoes were mismatched. Hair tangled like it had wrestled with the night wind and lost. She clutched a thin blanket like a lifeline, and her eyes. Oh, her eyes. There was something about them. Haunted, hollow, but not empty. Dominic's brow furrowed. The maitre d' rushed toward the entrance like a man racing to swat a fly off fine china. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Walsh. This won't take a second," he said, already moving to shoo her away. The woman stepped inside as the door opened, and immediately the warmth of the restaurant hit her like a wave. Her lips trembled, not from cold, but perhaps from disbelief. "I'm not here to steal or cause trouble," she whispered. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. Just some leftovers. Please." Her voice cracked, and something in it made one of the servers stop mid-step. But not Dominic. He set down his wine glass, eyes sharp now, calculating. This was his evening, his moment. The last thing he wanted was a scene. The maitre d' grabbed the woman's arm a little too firmly. "Ma'am, I must ask you to leave. Now." She didn't resist, but her gaze, it swept across the room, landing on Dominic. And just for a heartbeat, something shifted. A flicker. Recognition? Number impossible. Dominic didn't recognize beggars. He funded charities, yes, tax benefits and PR strategies, but he didn't see them. Still, her eyes locked with his, and he felt a strange tug, like a memory trying to surface through fog. "I just wanted some warmth," she said again, her voice softer now, as though defeated. Dominic stood. The entire restaurant held its breath. He walked slowly toward her, deliberate, controlled. The maitre d' backed away, sensing the shift. The woman straightened slightly, eyes wary but steady. Dominic stopped just inches away. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then, with a voice as cold as his wine, he said, "This isn't a soup kitchen. Take your tragedy elsewhere." The silence that followed was suffocating. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just nodded, as if she'd expected it, as if she'd heard it too many times before. She turned slowly, and just before she stepped out the door, Her blanket slipped slightly, exposing her hand. And that's when he saw it. A ring. Not just any ring. A delicate silver band with a sapphire stone, chipped on the edge the way he remembered it. Because he'd bought it, years ago, in college, for someone he never stopped thinking about. The air around him froze. She disappeared through the doors, swallowed by the night. But that ring, it burned in his mind. His pulse raced. His world, so carefully crafted, so perfect, now trembled. Who was she? And why was she wearing her ring? The night pressed against the glass as if the world outside knew something had cracked inside Dominic Walsh. He stood frozen, eyes fixed on the door long after it had shut. Around him, murmurs picked up. Someone tried to refill his wine. He didn't even blink. That ring, it wasn't just similar. It was exact, down to the thin engraving inside the band. He remembered every curve of it because he'd spent a week's pay on it as a broke college kid. It was meant to be a promise, a future, and he had given it to only one person, Elise, Elise Monroe, the girl who used to make coffee taste like comfort, whose laugh lingered longer than the sunset. The only woman who ever made him believe love was more than a distraction. They'd had everything, until they didn't. She'd left. No goodbye, no closure, just vanished. And Dominic had buried that pain under empires and investment portfolios. But now a beggar had her ring. He couldn't ignore it. Storming past his untouched steak, he threw a black card on the table without a glance and walked out into the bitter night air. The city didn't wait. Cars honked, people bustled past, but he stood there scanning the sidewalks, his breath clouding in front of him. Nothing. Then to the left, just beyond the alley near the dumpsters, he saw a hunched figure, curling into herself like a leaf caught in the wind. He approached slowly, cautiously, like she might disappear again. "Hey," he called out. She didn't turn. "Wait," he said louder, closer now. "That ring, where did you get that ring?" The woman looked up. Her face was weathered by years he hadn't seen. Lines of exhaustion and grief carved into cheeks that once blushed at his touch. Her eyes were swollen, dark underneath, but unmistakable. Those were Elise's eyes. She froze when she saw him. The cold air didn't matter. It was like time stopped. "Dominic?" she rasped, barely audible. His breath hitched. "Elise!" She gave a broken smile. "Of course you'd recognize the ring before the person." He stepped back, almost dizzy. "You? Where have you been? What happened to you?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she wiped them fast, like she didn't have the right to cry in front of him. "I didn't want you to see me like this," she whispered. "I wasn't supposed to come here. I was just hungry." There was a flicker of something in his chest. Guilt, shock, something he hadn't felt in a long time. "You vanished, Elise. I looked for you. I thought you were dead," he said, his voice trembling between anger and heartbreak. "I might as well have been," she replied. "I got sick, really sick. Hospital bills, debt collectors. And when I tried to come back, everything was gone. You were gone. You had become this." He stared at her, struggling to reconcile the woman in front of him with the girl who used to sketch constellations on his ceiling. "You should have come to me," he said. She laughed, bitter and tired. "What would I say? Hi, I'm homeless now. Do you have a spare room in your penthouse? You're still wearing the ring." Silence. She looked down at her hand, and her voice cracked as she said, "It's the only thing I kept. Through shelters, through sleeping under bridges. When I sold everything else, clothes, jewelry, even my mother's necklace, I couldn't let go of this. I needed to remember that once someone believed in me." Dominic swallowed hard. The sting behind his eyes was growing unbearable. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" he asked again, softer now. "Because the truth would have made you stay," she said. "And I didn't want to drag you down with me. You had dreams. I was drowning. You deserved better than someone who couldn't even afford dinner." He crouched in front of her then, his $1,000 coat brushing the dirty concrete, uncaring. For once, the CEO, the empire builder, the untouchable, none of it mattered. "You were never a burden," he whispered. You were my home. She looked away, biting her lips so hard it nearly bled. I don't even know who I am anymore, she confessed. Every day was just survival. I haven't spoken to anyone like this I don't remember when. Dominic's jaw clenched. This isn't how your story ends, he said almost to himself. Not here. Not like this. But even as he said it, he realized he didn't know her story anymore. He didn't know where she'd been, what she'd lost, or what kind of scars she carried under that torn coat. All he knew was that she wasn't a stranger. She was a chapter left unfinished, and now the past had walked back into his life through a restaurant door, starved and broken, but not lost. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I'm calling my driver, he said firmly. You're coming with me. Her eyes widened. Dominic, no. I don't want your pity. It's not pity, he interrupted. It's regret, and maybe a second chance. Her lips parted to protest, but no words came, only tears. And then, from behind them, a noise, a soft cough. Dominic turned. A kid, maybe 8 or 9, stood near the alley's edge. Big eyes, thin jacket, fear in every inch of him. Mom, is everything okay? Elise turned slowly. It's okay, baby. Just stay back. Dominic felt his stomach drop. She had a child, a son. His mind spun, trying to calculate timelines, years, possibilities. Elise, he said slowly, is he? But the answer was written all over her face before she could say a word. Dominic's world tilted on its axis. The city noise faded into a low, muffled hum. All he could hear was the sound of his own breath, too shallow, too fast, and the boy's soft, uncertain footsteps as he slowly approached his mother. Elise knelt and wrapped her arms around the child protectively, her eyes never leaving Dominic. Elise, he whispered again, but it was more like a plea now. Is he mine? Her silence was an answer more powerful than any words. She looked away, her face collapsing as tears streamed down her cheeks. The boy looked between them, confused but aware. Children always know more than we want them to. Dominic stared at the child. Dark hair, slightly curled at the ends, just like Elise's. But the eyes, God, those eyes, they were his. His knees gave in and he sat hard on the cold pavement, eyes locked on the boy. What's his name? Elise hesitated. Then quietly, like saying it might break something sacred, she replied, Daniel. His chest tightened. Daniel, the name they'd once whispered late at night, dreaming about someday. A name they'd chosen together when they were young and foolish and still believed forever was something real. How old is he? 9. 9. That number hit him like a punch. 9 years ago, she'd disappeared. 9 years of birthdays, first words, scraped knees, and late-night fevers. 9 years of being a father and never knowing it. He turned to her, the anger gone now, replaced by something worse. Sorrow. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep him from me? She looked broken. Because I didn't think I could give him anything, and I thought maybe you'd already moved on. You were becoming someone, Dominic. I watched from the sidelines. I saw you rise. You were on magazine covers, billionaire lists. I was sleeping in shelters. What was I supposed to do? Call and say, hey, surprise! You're a dad. I'm broke. Can you help? I didn't want him to grow up feeling like a mistake. Dominic looked at Daniel again. The boy was quiet, but his hand held tightly onto his mother's. His small face was unreadable, but there was curiosity in his eyes. Maybe even a little hope. He reached out instinctively, then stopped himself, unsure, his voice trembling. Daniel, The boy tilted his head. Are you my dad? Dominic's heart cracked right down the center. He blinked back tears and nodded slowly. I think I am. And Daniel, in the innocent way only a child can manage, just asked, do dads always wear suits? A broken laugh escaped Elise, and even Dominic couldn't help the smile that tugged at the corner of his mouth. He shook his head. Not always. Sometimes they wear pajamas and get cereal in their hair. Daniel grinned slightly, and that tiny smile hit Dominic harder than any boardroom victory ever had. He reached for his phone again. Elise panicked. No, Dominic, please. Don't call anyone. Don't make this a thing. We don't need a camera crew or your assistant or a press release. I just needed some food. That's all. He looked at her, and this time there was no pity in his eyes, no condescension, just pain. I'm not calling the press. I'm calling my chef. You and Daniel are coming home with me. She shook her head, trembling. We can't. That's not. We don't belong in that world. But Dominic stood again, brushed the dirt off his knees and held out his hand. Yes, he said quietly. You do. You always did. I just didn't fight hard enough to keep you in it. She stared at him for a long moment, and for the first time that night, he saw it. The Elise he remembered. The fire, the strength, the woman who used to challenge him to be better, stronger, the one who once believed he could change the world. Tears filled her eyes as she took his hand. He led them both, mother and son, to the car waiting nearby. The driver opened the door, confused but silent. As they slid into the back seat, Daniel nestled beside his mom, still holding her hand. Dominic sat across from them, still dazed, still unsure if he was dreaming. He studied Daniel, how small he looked, how much he'd already endured, and Elise, thinner than she should be, exhausted but still beautiful. Not the polished, high society beauty his world worshipped, but real beauty, worn, raw, and incredibly brave. The car rolled through the city, past skyscrapers Dominic owned, past billboards with his name. He didn't look at any of them. He looked at them, the family he never knew he had, the family he'd nearly turned away without a second glance. In the quiet hum of the ride, Daniel suddenly asked, Do you have toys at your house? Dominic blinked, then chuckled. Not yet, but I think we can fix that. Do you have food? Daniel asked next, voice hesitant but hopeful. Dominic's throat tightened. As much as you want. Anything you want. The boy nodded and leaned his head on Elise's shoulder. And for a moment in the back of that luxury SUV, silence felt like peace. But Dominic knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. There were questions to answer, wounds to heal, time to reclaim. And somewhere deep inside him, something had started to shift. The empire he built had never made him feel this way. No merger, no IPO, no million-dollar deal had ever left him trembling like this. Not from fear, but from the realization that he almost lost the only thing that had ever truly mattered. The mansion stood like a fortress against the dark, its towering windows glowing with warmth. But as the SUV rolled up the long driveway and the gates closed behind them, Elise shifted nervously beside Daniel. Her hand instinctively pulled her coat tighter, as though the extravagance around her might melt her into nothing. Dominic saw the hesitation. He leaned forward gently, voice low. You're safe now. No one here is going to judge you, not in my house. The doors opened, and the warm scent of cedar and fresh linen wafted out. Marble floors, soft lights, walls lined with art that could buy small countries. It was overwhelming. Daniel stared in awe, his small sneakers squeaking on the polished surface. Elise's eyes were scanning every inch, every silent servant who passed, every chandelier above their heads, as though waiting for someone to tell her she didn't belong. Dominic turned to the staff, whose eyes had widened at the sight of him with two unexpected guests. This is Elise, he said firmly, then looked at the boy. And this is Daniel. Prepare 2 guest rooms, warm food, clothes, now. There was no hesitation. As Elise was ushered upstairs by a kind-faced housekeeper, and Daniel wandered off in awe toward a room filled with plush chairs and a piano, Dominic stood in the center of his palace, completely undone. He hadn't cried in years, not when his company went public, not when he signed 8-figure deals, but now he sat alone at the edge of his grand staircase, put his face in his hands and wept, quietly, powerlessly, because the truth had cracked through every layer of success, and beneath all of it was a man who had been profoundly, desperately alone, and hadn't even known it. 2 hours passed like seconds. By the time he knocked on Elise's door, she had showered, changed into fresh clothes, and looked more like the woman he remembered. Still tired, still worn, but with a quiet dignity that glowed. She opened the door slowly. "I didn't expect to sleep in silk sheets tonight," she said with a small smile. He smiled back, unsure, searching for words. "Elise, I—" He stopped, then began again. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need to know, can I be a part of his life?" She looked at him for a long moment. "You never stopped being a part of it. I told him about you, you know. I just didn't give him your name. He called you the man in the stars. I used to say you were out there building towers in the sky, watching over us." Dominic's throat clenched. "I wasn't. I was blind, obsessed with being someone, and all this time, I didn't even know I already was." She stepped aside, letting him into the room. Daniel was asleep on the bed, hugging a giant stuffed bear one of the staff must have brought in. His cheeks were rosy. For the first time in maybe years, he looked like a child. Safe, warm, loved. Dominic walked to the side of the bed and just watched him. Watched his chest rise and fall. Watched the softness of a dream begin to settle on his features. "I missed everything," he whispered. His first steps, his first word, his first scar. "I missed everything." Elise came beside him, her voice gentle. "You didn't miss the rest, and the rest is what matters now." He turned to her. His voice broke. "I want to be his father, not a checkbook, not a weekend visitor. I want to be there, for everything." She nodded. "Then be there." He looked at her again. The woman who once disappeared into the shadows of the city. The woman who fought to survive when the world turned its back. The woman who raised a child on scraps and fear and still found a way to teach him hope. "Elise," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I lost you once. I can't do it again." Her lips parted, but she hesitated. Then she said the words he never expected to hear. "You never really lost me," she said. "I was just waiting to be found." And just like that, something shattered between them. Not painfully, but softly, like ice thawing after too long a winter. The space that had once been filled with silence and distance began to close, thread by thread, heart to heart. He reached out and took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Days passed, then weeks. Dominic introduced Daniel as his son publicly, sparking headlines and curiosity. But he didn't care. He moved meetings around bedtime stories, canceled events for school functions. Slowly, awkwardly, but fiercely, he learned to be a father. Daniel, in turn, bloomed. He laughed louder, slept deeper, trusted more. And Elise? She stopped looking over her shoulder. She started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Her hands remembered the brush like an old friend, and Dominic hung every piece she made in the halls of his home, like museum treasures. One evening, months later, Dominic knelt in the garden behind his house. Elise stood beneath the tree Daniel loved to climb, watching the sunset. Her hair glowed gold in the fading light. He pulled the same ring from his pocket, old, chipped, and beautiful. "I never got to do this the right way," he said, voice trembling. "But I'm ready now. And if you'll have me, Elise, I'd like to start again. Not from where we left off, but from where we are." Tears streamed down her face. She didn't speak. She just nodded. And Dominic, the man who once built skyscrapers to escape the ground, finally found his foundation in the place he'd least expected it. Not in fortune, not in fame, but in the eyes of a woman who survived, and the boy who wore his name in silence for 9 long years. Because sometimes the things we try hardest to build are the very things we've already been given. And the truth can change everything. Even a cold-hearted CEO, even a forgotten love, even a broken family, made whole again.